Mr. Kenneth Tiong.
Deputy Speaker, I support the principles underlying this bill. A population-scale set of longitudinal medical records is the means of production for more timely interventions, accurate diagnoses, and preventive health at large. The contribution of data to the NEHR will create a valuable data set, and that value should flow to all Singaporeans. But before I move on to the question of value, my belief is that a bill that compels contribution must also come with robust ecosystem safeguards. From my conversations with practitioners and from my reading of the bill, I have three sets of concerns. A, the disproportionate cybersecurity burden on small providers. B, the uploading of sensitive medical information despite patient objections. And C, possible insurance loopholes that may render our privacy protections ineffective. I'll then speak to a broader question. If we are building a national health asset, who benefits, and how do we continue to ensure it catalyzes a dynamic ecosystem rather than being captured by a single monopoly provider? First, to the cybersecurity obligations imposed on healthcare providers. The bill designates all HCSA licensees from tertiary hospitals employing thousands to single doctor GP clinics in HDB heartlands as relevant persons under Section 64. All face the same statutory obligations to implement reasonable controls for secure processing, reasonable safeguards against unauthorized access, and cybersecurity protections under Section 66 and 68. The penalties for non-compliance are severe: fines up to 200,000 or 2 years imprisonment for individuals and up to 1 million for other entities. Now, the bill does use the word reasonable, which implies proportionality. But I've spoken with doctors who run small operations. They worry that when a breach occurs, and breaches are a matter of when and not if, the enforcement spotlight will fall on them. Did they have sufficient firewalls? Was their antivirus updated? Were their staff trained adequately? They fear being hung out to dry. I also wish to speak for some of my constituents who are senior GPs still practicing in the heartlands. Many are approaching retirement and are not tech savvy. They will struggle with the digitalization requirements that this bill will impose. If the transition is too abrupt and not well managed, many of these senior GPs may feel forced to retire early or sell their independent clinics to large corporate chains. Accelerating consolidation in the primary care sector. The end state of a modern integrated health information system is desirable, but the transition must be managed carefully. So I ask, 1, would the ministry issue clear tiered guidance on what constitutes reasonable safeguards for practices of different sizes? A safe harbor framework, if you will. 2, will the ministry consider providing or subsidizing cybersecurity insurance for small providers so that they do not shoulder the entire financial risk of a breach? 3, will there be a transition period with educational enforcement rather than immediate punitive action to allow smaller providers to build up cybersecurity capabilities? 4, could the ministry offer transitional support for senior practitioners nearing retirement? Perhaps something as simple as sending personnel to help digitalize their records monthly. Second, to the question of sensitive medical conditions that patients wish to keep private. There's a group of patients today who pay cash, wanting to keep their records, perhaps with sexually transmitted infections, mental health conditions, or abortion records off the system. Many foreigners also do not want to be on NEHR. Under this bill, the option will no longer exist. The bill provides for access restrictions. Class 1, that prevents all access, and Class 2, that restricts access for specific purposes or persons. But as Section 30, subsection Clause 7 states, quote, to avoid doubt, an access restriction does not prevent or restrict the contribution of health information, end quote. So the data is uploaded and stored centrally. Any access restriction is a viewing control. It masks who can see the data. It does not exclude the data from NEHR. If the burden of proof is on the custodian of NEHR to have a robust privacy model, let us examine the custodian. Synapse, the custodian of NEHR, was rebranded from IHIS, which was responsible for allowing the 2018 compromise of 1.5 million SingHealth patient records. The COI found that IHIS staff lacked adequate cybersecurity awareness, that key staff failed to take appropriate action, even when there were clear signs of an ongoing attack, and the CISO's response was, I quote, clearly lacking and displayed an alarming lack of concern. This has led many doctors to mistrust Synapse in these matters. Given the history here, I believe our health authorities also need to take steps towards rebuilding that trust. So I ask, 1, how is MOH going to police unjustified access of NEHR where rogue elements read medical histories of unrelated people? What assurance can MOH give us that our health data is safe with sign-ups? 2. If such unauthorized access occurs, does proactive monitoring exist, or will the system rely solely on whistleblowers and complaints? 3. What is the technical architecture for access-restricted data? Is it encrypted separately? Is it stored in a segregated environment? Or is it simply flagged in the same database, such that a breach would expose it alongside unrestricted records? 4. What is the access model for NEHR data? In Taiwan, the National Health Insurance System uses a dual card approach. The patient must present their Health IC smart card, the doctor uses the professional IC card, and both are required for access with written patient consent. This dual authorization prevents rogue access because no single party can retrieve records alone. Will Singapore's NEHR access model include such safeguards? And 5, what is MOH's position on specific carve-outs for defined sensitive conditions where patients can opt out of contribution entirely? Moving on to insurance. Speaker, I commend the drafters of this bill for their attention to the concern regarding the use of medical information for insurance underwriting. Section 6 defines excluded purposes to include deciding whether to insure an individual, continuing or renewing insurance, or processing insurance claims. So Section 19.2 prohibits specified users from accessing any HR for any excluded purpose, and 38.5 imposes enhanced penalties for accessing records for excluded purposes. Insurers cannot access any HR directly. Healthcare providers cannot access any HR on behalf of insurers, and the patient's consent cannot be used to circumvent these protections. Now, is it watertight? Let me offer 2 possible scenarios. Scenario 1. According to Section 3.1.2.2 of the draft guidelines on appropriate use and access to any HR, released by MOH in 2023, quote, in the event that such information was previously transcribed from any HR to the patient's clinical notes, it will be treated as part and parcel of the medical record belonging to a healthcare institution, end quote. Meanwhile, integrated plan insurers are increasingly requiring doctors to sign contracts containing inspection and right to audit clauses. These clauses grant insurers the right to inspect full medical records to verify claims. The result is that doctors check any HR for relevant history, past abortions, IVF treatment, mental health conditions, STIs, and note it in their files for clinical safety. Because of these audit clauses, insurers then gain access to this sensitive transcribed NEHR data, even if it's irrelevant to the current claim. A patient going in for gallbladder surgery may find the insurer reviewing their psychiatric history. Scenario 2. Section 17.1 provides that an individual may access and collect their own accessible health information. A Singaporean applies for insurance. The insurer application form may include a new requirement. Please attach a complete printout of your NEHR. No printout, no policy. Once the data leaves the system through legitimate patient access, it seems beyond the bill's reach. So even if insurers do not require NEHR printout directly, they already have a right to refuse payouts if a pre-existing condition wasn't previously disclosed. If an applicant fails to disclose a condition, now one that now sits permanently in the NEHR, the insurers can void the policy at claim time when they discover the non-disclosure through other means. The existence of NEHR with a comprehensive longitudinal record makes non-disclosure almost impossible to sustain. So I ask, 1, does MOH agree that a transcription pathway where NEHR-derived information entering clinical notes and becomes accessible to insurers through audit clauses defeats the legislative intent of Section 6? 2, what if there is a data breach? Can insurers now use the now public information? 3, will the government work with MES to prohibit insurers from requiring NEHR payouts or NEHR-derived information as a condition of coverage, claim processing, or policy renewal? 4, will the government review the inspection and right to audit clauses in integrated plan contracts to ensure that they do not circumvent the excluded purposes provision? And 5, if an insurer is found to utilize either sort of pathway, what enforcement mechanisms will exist? Will this be a matter for MES, MOH, or both? Speaker, I now wish to speak to a broader question. This bill will create, for the first time, a comprehensive national database. Social determinants such as postal code, education, marital status. Clinical outcomes such as blood pressure readings over decades, medications prescribed, and soon, perhaps genomic data from the SG100K project. It is a formidable data set. It is a means of production, not just of population health outcomes, but also of significant economic value. So how do we ensure that value from this national health data infrastructure and its possible monetization of any form flows to citizens? Globally, startups are experimenting with patient-centric data models where individuals can choose to share their data for research and receive compensation. I believe a monopoly, such as Synapse, may not experiment with such models, but a contestable market will. Some players may try patient-centric approaches, and the best models will emerge. To create the conditions for competition discovered, that requires open APIs, interoperability standards, likely opt-in mechanisms of the sort my honorable colleague Fali Fauzi mentioned, and a contestable application layer. Speaker, let me turn to the Deputy Speaker, let me turn to the system operator. Section 8 provides that minister may designate a system operator to operate, administer, and maintain the National Electronic Record System. In practice, this will be Synapse. Synapse, formerly known as IHIS, today employs about 3,500 people. It serves as a technology backbone for our entire public healthcare system. When IHIS was set up in 2008, I believe the original vision was that it would operate on contestable principles. MOH would issue tenders, IHIS would compete, win some, lose some. It would have enough work to survive, but we need to compete elsewhere to thrive. In doing so, it would face enough competition to stay efficient. This model was the original plan for MINDEF and ST Engineering. Dr. Goh Keng Swee, speaking in 1977, said, quote, "We do not own or run enterprises on ideological grounds. We expect government-owned enterprises to be efficient, to make money, and to expand whenever feasible. If a government-owned enterprise loses money, it is allowed to go bankrupt, and this has happened, fortunately, in very few instances." End quote. This was and is the discipline of contestability. GLEs were to be subject to market forces. But the current model for Synapse has drifted from this vision. Today, MOH relies almost exclusively on Synapse to implement its technology integrations. There is capture and cost inflation. An engineer is hired at $5,000 a month. That engineer services are sold to public healthcare clusters at significantly higher rates. If the markups are excessive, then they can become excessive in absence of competition, it can crowd out innovation and make the ecosystem weaker than it should be. I believe a different model is possible and necessary. My vision for Synapse is different. It would return to the original contestable principles surrounding IHIS creation. First, I would seek to separate Synapse into two entities. The first entity should be a core infrastructure company. It would handle standard setting, data exchange protocols, security baselines, and the NEHR plumbing. This stays government-owned and lean, perhaps a few hundred people. It runs the pipes and sets the protocols, but does not compete at the application layer. The second entity would be a commercial services company. It would handle system integration, consulting, and vendor management. This gets spun off, maybe privatized, maybe converted to GLC that must compete commercially, both domestically and internationally. Second, MOH must reacquire the in-house capacity to be an intelligent buyer of technology services. Before or concurrent with any Synapse restructuring, MOH needs a technical unit of about 50 to 100 people, not administrators, but engineers, data architects, security specialists, people who can evaluate bids, write specifications, and challenge cost claims. Without this capacity, the ministry will find it hard to escape capture. Third, we should legislate interoperability standards and open API requirements for all health data intermediaries, including any entity that emerges from Synapse. The goal is to ensure that the application layer, the layer where innovation happens, is open and contestable. Now, I happen to think all this can be done within 4 to 5 years. Speaker, with such contestability and with opening for opt-in mechanisms where citizens can choose to share their data for specific purposes and receive compensation, I believe the NEHR can be the means of production for 3 outcomes. A, better population scale outcomes. This is the primary purpose and I support it fully. B, a fair stake in data monetization for every citizen. If value is going to be extracted from the data, we should create conditions where citizens can likely share in it, not just bear the risk. C, an ecosystem catalyst for health-based startups. With open APIs and interoperability, Singapore can become a place for health tech innovation. Startups can build on any NEHR platform. SMEs can compete for contracts. We can export health tech capabilities regionally. The NEHR can become a flywheel for a more dynamic health tech ecosystem, one that benefits government, citizens, and entrepreneurs alike, not merely a government-only benefits asset. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, I support this principle of a unified national health record. It can improve care, reduce waste, and enable the precision medicine of tomorrow. But a bill that compels contribution must also come with robust ecosystem safeguards. Those compelled to contribute must be protected from disproportionate burden or liability. Privacy controls must be real, since access controls do not exclude data from any HR. A breach potentially exposes everything regardless of restrictions. Possible loopholes must be closed. Today, insurers cannot access any HR, but perhaps through transcription and audit clauses, they can access any HR-derived information sitting in clinical notes. In locking the front door, we must also lock the back door. And if we are to build a national data asset, we must ensure that it's governed by contestable principles, not captured by a monopoly provider. The original vision for IHIS was discipline through competition. We should return to it. I look forward to the Ministry's reply. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.